to all the Yohos out there. A Yoho is not a permanent situation that you have to be in. You don't have to remain a Yoho for the rest of your life. And I just feel like it's not a permanent position to be a punk. But I will put your ass as a Yoho for the rest of your life if you don't change your ways. What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to Just F and Go podcast with Sam Jimenez and Charlie Herrera-Villar. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe, like, retweet, repost, all that stuff. We are on all platforms. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Stitcher. So go ahead, hit that like, subscribe button. So today we're going to get into it with a couple of topics, some that we've touched on before that have been reinforced with certain events that have happened during the time, and some that we haven't. So here we go. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing wonderful. As wonderful as I can be, I guess, right now. Had a crazy night. Kids fall is what happened. Kids, I have 2 young daughters, and my daughter took a little fall last night. Had to go to the hospital, a little mild concussion, but she's a champ. She's doing all right, but a little bit worrisome. So, it was kind of a late night. So I'm just getting around, drinking some coffee, trying to get this energy up, but things are well, things are blessed. As we talked about yesterday, Charlie, every day we wake up is a small victory. Every day you wake up is a victory. So feeling good in general. How about yourself?
Same, man. Every day, like you were saying, you have another chance to, like, all right, how do I dominate this day? How do I do it better than the day before? So it's one of those. Was this, the first concussion your daughter's had, or?
Yes. Definitely. So it was a little scary. I'm sure, like, I wasn't home. I was at work, and then, my wife, took care of it all and was definitely scared. I got off in time to try and meet him at the hospital, but by the time I got there, they're, checking out. But everything's all gravy. She was herself for most of the rest of the night. We just try to keep an eye on it and make sure nothing was going too crazy. Like you said, I think one thing that I've been trying to get back to right now is, like, mastering the day, like you talk about, like, dominating the day. And now I'm like, all right, man, got to get back to mastering the mind and mastering the energy and mastering the day. So definitely woke up today and got some meditation in. I haven't in a little while. So, just as crazy as work has been, talked about it on the podcast a little bit, slowing down a little bit, but definitely felt the need to, like, all right, recenter, get some meditation in, some quiet time in the morning, spend some time with my plants, a little plant daddy situation, and continue building from there.
That's solid, dude. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, like we talked about yesterday with the small victories, and just waking up is a small victory, but I know it's like a sliding scale, right? You're either super going, or you're doing the opposite and regressing. And an object in motion stays in motion, an object at rest stays at rest. And so when I do these little victories where it's just like, all right, like, pat yourself on the back sometimes for, I made my bed today. Or fucking, right now for you, I meditated. That's a huge thing, because to take time out of your day to say, I need to just stop for a second and keep myself composed, that takes a lot, dude. And you have to shut yourself up after so much stimulation going on around you. That's a huge victory.
Much noise. I think, especially, like, I know it's a Taurus thing at times. Even though your sister was like, Charlie ain't no Taurus.
Bro. She's gonna be glowing as she hears that she got mentioned on this podcast. Right?
We can talk about that another time. But, like, I know it's a Taurus thing. Like, there's an extreme love of comfort. Obviously, I think Taurus, like, part of the Taurus zodiac thing is, like, hardworking, but also a desire for comfort and, like, very much a homebody. So I know, like, there are, like, positives and negatives in, like, the polarity scale to each, right? And I think for me, myself, if I'm not going, if I don't have a routine of, like, everything that I need to get done and constantly going, then I'm probably not doing anything. I'm probably I'm probably on the couch.
Yeah.
Might pull up, play some Call of Duty or something, and so
That's something that's sorry, my fault.
No, you're good.
That was something, and this is kind of off the topics that we were supposed to or that we were going to discuss, but just real quick, like something that I used to talk about to my therapist, and I talked to my friend about, is my constant need to improve myself or to just be hustling and grinding. And I have my reasons or the things that I think are the cause of it, right? From my upbringing and all this other stuff, fear of abandonment or whatever. Like, you have to constantly be on top of your shit to not, for me, I feel like it's to not be abandoned. But as you're saying that, I know that a part of me is, if I am not productive, I'm going to be the laziest person out there. And I don't want to be that. Like, 100%. And I feel like people like me because I'm productive and because I like to grind and this and that. Because they're not going to like the other guy that is just like, all right, we chill.
I know, exactly. I'm on the couch with a bag of chips, watching whatever ridiculous thing. I don't watch too much ridiculous TV. I'd probably be watching like a documentary. But then I'd probably watch like 6 documentaries in a row, and then be like, "Fuck, what did I do today? I didn't do shit."
Yeah.
But
we're good at both ends of the spectrum.
100%. But you got to learn how to control it. I think is what we're getting at. Is like, you got to know when to, like, say, I need to get my ass up and go and do something productive, and stay on that train. But then also sometimes you need that rest, so don't feel too guilty about it. But
Yep.
There's a fine line between rest and relaxation, and then laziness. I don't know if it's like too fine of a line, but you can. It's a slippery slope, I guess, is more than just a fine line. Crazy few weeks. Lots of stuff has been happening. Obviously, there are constantly major things happening in the world, but especially on the West Coast right now. The whole Portland situation has reached like this climax in the last few days, especially with like Portland's mayor Ted Wheeler being tear gassed by federal agents, which is like completely nuts to me. I'm like, this is a state official, like a major state official, right? Or city official, I guess, and like you have federal agents tear gassing city officials. And it's like this crazy situation that I'm like, I can't even, it's hard for me to wrap my head around. And then you have, the ACLU broke news last night that a federal court just issued a restraining order on the federal agents in Portland. So that's to some degree a major win for right now. I guess it's a win in the battle of like trying to fight this fascist regime, I guess. But the scary part is that, like, Donald Trump has expressed the desire to send federal agents into multiple cities. I know Chicago, their mayor, Lori Lightfoot, has kind of agreed to take some federal agents in Chicago, and DC and Oakland are kind of on that list of places that unmarked federal agents may come to next and just start swooping people up off of the streets. So it's definitely a crazy time. You have feelings on it, Charlie?
Yeah, man. I think those, it's hard to, for me to try to feel a certain way, right? Because one, information that's out there, what's going on, what's happening. Because I'm not on the front line, so I don't know, right? And I do also understand that the media sometimes does make things a little bit more crazy than it is, for sure. In this situation, the idea that I could get swooped up by an unmarked car, unmarked agent, would create a little bit of violence in me, at least, and I think about if my loved one, a brother, a sister, was out protesting, and then all of a sudden some car kidnaps them. Oh yeah, there's going to be a little bit of hell going on for sure. So I don't know what they think when they're doing these things. Like, the message that you're sending out there to people. So it's trippy. I do have a family member that is in Homeland Security, and he's been trying to get me in there for a minute and for the longest time since it happened. I mean, we had a conversation about it because I'll just say it's my stepdad, right? It's my mom's ex-husband. And, he was born in Mexico as well. And he used to, and he still is, like, I understand his reasoning for why he joined when he joined, but before we ran the office of, we helped the National Institute of Health, the Office of Minority Health, and we did a lot of health fairs for Latino communities that are undocumented, that don't have health insurance, and we did a lot to try to get health to them. So for a long time, it was always helping out that community. So when he did this move to join Homeland Security, it was a real weird moment for me, just because, like, we've always been on the opposite side, and now it seems like you're switching. And his reasoning for switching, one, it was hard to get jobs after a while, even though he was an entrepreneur himself. He actually started the Chabot College flea market on Saturdays. And and so he's always been very much about the people. And so it was weird for me. And I know it came from pressures of financial need. But his biggest thing was, I hate going across the border and getting discriminated. And I hate that those things happen. And if I'm in there, I can stop that from happening to those people, because I'm there to check that. And, since then, my mom and him have gotten divorced, so I don't really have too much information. I've called them when I found out about those kids in cages, and I was like, what's going on? And he didn't know what was going on. He's like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how much of it is true that he didn't know, that he did know during that time. So when I hear about these things with Homeland Security, I'm like, damn, could my stepdad actually be doing that? Is that everybody? Is that not everybody? And there's times where I hit him up like, what's popping? And there's times where he doesn't respond. Because I mean, you join a clique and you join a clique, so that's what it is. I still believe in his heart. I hope. But I know that when you surround yourself with a certain group, you're going to start having your information, your intel telling you how you should be feeling about these moments. So I try reading, what's going on. I heard that when the mayor got tear gassed, people were throwing shit over some federal building and almost lighting it on fire. So I'm not sure if the tear gas happened to be around the mayor while they were burning shit, or if they were intentionally trying to tear gas the mayor. That being said, I still don't know why we're using tear gas on citizens in the first place. So,
to me, it's an extremely scary thought of, like, getting picked up by unmarked federal agents. Whether I would, not to say that you always have to put yourself in position for that to happen. Sometimes it's just a wrong place, wrong time. But, I try to be very smart about the situations I put myself in. I have been to protests. I have been to, situations that turn into riots. But I understand for myself, like, the most important job that I have to do is to be a father. And, I have to make sure that I make it home at night. So I try to always be smart about the situations that I put myself in. But even then, man, like, to think of a situation where I am out and, like, this shit happens, part of me is just like, if I don't know who you are, I'm not going out like that, man. And it's easy for me to say that now, not being in that situation. You never really know how you're going to react when shit like that does happen. But I'm like, bro, you're going to have to kill me, homie.
And the thing is, I think they're wearing, like, camo or some other type of uniform with no badge number. But I'm like, in the state of where we're at right now with racial tensions and, people in power abusing power, probably not the time to try to further your reach. It's already it's about to hit a flashpoint, so.
Yeah. The reality is, like, I'm not saying that people would, but I'm just saying that anybody could buy fatigues in a camo and drive around in a minivan and just start swooping people. And to me, that's what goes through my head. It's like, I don't know who you are. Like, I'm not going in like some city vehicle or state vehicle or federal vehicle. You're about to put me in this minivan. Nah,
and I gotta see what the legality is of having self-defense during those moments when you don't have an officer of the law identifying themselves as an officer of the law, and you attack back or you defend yourself, right? Like at that point, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a right to defend yourself with that situation. But if you get caught up, you get taken to a federal prison and you don't have it, you could try to defend yourself after the ass whooping that you're about to get up in there. But like, you're going to get that ass whooping.
Real ass whooping is going to happen. Some real ass whoopings happening. But also something you touched on, and it's something that I think about often is like, when talking about your stepdad and like, when you join a group of people, this group think happens and like, you kind of get sucked in sometimes to like this way of thinking. And it's hard, like, it's hard for me to fault people, like individuals at times for the way like that the group of people that they're involved with thinks, right? It takes a really strong person to be able to maintain like their individuality and their individual thought process and their belief systems when they're constantly surrounded by just this like singular process of thought. And so, I think about that in terms of like when I talk about policing or the military or any situation, because it's like, I guess it goes back to some degree like prison politics, and like you have correctional officers in these prisons and the way that inmates will often look at it as like that's the biggest gang on the yard. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not cops in here, they're not correctional officers, they're a gang, and they're the most powerful gang on this yard. And so that's the way I think about it too, even on the streets. It's like these cops are a gang at the end of the day. And they're going to stick together the way, most other people that are clicked up like that are going to stick together. And there's like, I guess this, I don't condone it, but I understand it. I understand like the riding for your people, riding for your brother, riding for your sister, and viewing it that way. And feeling like, all right, I got to keep my mouth shut because that's my folks. And
there's a lot of them, right? It's like, you're going to start getting influenced by some of that shit that's going around you. As much as you don't want to be, like you could have a pretty pure heart, but your resistance starts going down a little bit more,
Yeah, I think, like, I don't know if you want to like keep it on this topic, but, when we're talking about influence and, being surrounded by people and constantly taking in other people's opinions and other people's way of thinking and being influenced by, this Kanye West situation, to me is to some degree part of that as well. Like you're surrounded by people that maybe are feeding you what you want, what your ego wants to be fed. And any of these situations can turn into like ugly situations, whether it's in this instance of like these federal agents all riding together, or to me, like the Kanye West is a perfect example of that, bro. Like you're not surrounded by people that care about your mental health. And this is the shit that happens. They're just going to gas you up and you're going to start believing in your own bullshit. And
when you have a platform like Kanye does, ain't nobody going to help you out. Like, the media is going to make sure that even if you didn't finish your thought, or even if you whatever, you ain't gonna have you got the right to remain silent, because everything you say will be used against you in that platform. So
for I'm sure most people are aware, but Kanye West's little presidential campaign has kind of hit this crazy stop in Charleston. Is that where it was?
Somewhere in the Carolinas, I think.
Somewhere in the Carolinas, Kanye went on this. Had his, I think it was his first presidential speech or rally. Yeah. And it was disastrous to say the least, for a lot of reasons. And, he began to spew off things about like Harriet Tubman not, being this person who freed slaves. She was just selling, slaves to other white people for work. And, started to talk about, his daughter and his relationship with Kim, and definitely like burst into tears as he was explaining like his own mental health issues and going through depression, and at one time thinking about like killing his daughter or almost killing his daughter. And it was crazy. It was crazy. If you haven't seen the clip or the clips, it's just to me, when I look at it, it's just extremely heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to me to see the deterioration of a person's mental health, and nobody stepping in to like be like, yo, man, let's get you off the stage. Let's get you backstage. Even if it's like, yo, if you were my brother, if that's like my folks, and I'm not saying, maybe Kanye doesn't have people that like consider him that close, right? Maybe he's been toxic enough in his life to drive away people who have tried to have a positive influence on him. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But to me, if like, I look at it like, if that was my folks, if that was my brother, if that was like somebody that I really ride with, like, I don't give a fuck. We might fight on this stage, but I'm going to pull you off this stage to make sure you're not fucking your whole life up by saying bullshit and, you know, talking shit that you don't really know, and you're not really sure what you're talking about. Like, cool, bro, make me the bad guy. Well, that's fine. You know what I'm saying? I'll be evil to you for this next hour that you berate me in the back. But then I'm going to hug you and tell you I love you, bro, and we need to find you help. So the hardest part for me is just like, man, I know what it looks like. I know what it looks like. And you're right. The media is just going to play it up like, oh, Kanye is crazy. Everybody look at this madman. But really at the root of it, one thing I think of is like, everybody wants to critique the product of a system without critiquing the system that has created that product. Right. And I think Kanye is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, no, dude, you took the words out of my mouth. I was about to jump in, but I was like, well, no, I guess this topic is done, Sam. Nah, man. I got a lot of love for Kanye for his musical genius, well, his artistic genius, because it's not just when it comes to music, and for, you know, the influence he's had on my life. And I didn't always like Kanye in the beginning, and then I started liking it when the music started resonating with me a little bit more, and then I started kind of distancing myself after certain things he said. I don't want to say it was early on into the deterioration of his mental health, and because I don't know when, right? I mean, we all kind of know that it probably happened during when his mom passed away. That's definitely going to be a very traumatic experience that thankfully I have not experienced yet, nor do I want to anytime soon at all. But, oh man, you know, at first I used to say that he has such a great responsibility that he has to be careful about what he says and about what he does because of who he can influence. And I still somewhat agree to that. But as a human, as a parent, and as a citizen, I don't think that it's necessarily his responsibility, right? Like, I know myself that I sometimes, like even right now, right? I'm thinking as I talk. I haven't fully thought this whole thing out. And that's how we have conversation and dialogue to try to figure out what we believe, what we feel. And I need your perspective to help clarify what I'm feeling in case I have some blind spots. And so the issue is that I idolize a lot of these celebrities and we get our information from them as if, oh, if they said something that was clever, nice, and concise, that must be real. You know what I mean? And that's the truth. So the two last concerts that I went to for Kanye, one of them was my absolute favorite concert of all time. And then the second one I went to was the following month, just in a different location. And it was not my favorite concert of all time. But that's because that's when he started kind of going on these rants of just rants entirely. And then at the one that I was at the last one that I was at, he was playing with the crowd, and it was annoying for the fact that it's like, oh, come on, man, we're here to see a show. You're playing with the crowd. And at the very end, he was like, I'm in the Bay Area or Silicon Valley, and I'm going to say that, you know, matter of fact, I'm going to support Trump, right? And so I sat down at that moment just because I was like, oh, bro, in my mind, I'm thinking, you know how many people are in the middle here? How many young kids are going to go off of what you said and support Trump after that just because of it? And we're in an election year where it's like, you know, this was back a few years ago when Trump's first run for office. And, but I will say that everything he was saying during that show could have been taken as snippets, and it would have been a different kind of meaning than what was being said during that show. There was a lot of the times where Kanye was saying like, yo, I could interrupt this next song. After he interrupted song after song after song, he's like, and you're gonna be pissed off and you're gonna be booing and we're booing, and he's like, but I'm gonna play the next hit and you guys are gonna forget about everything I just did. And he did that over and over, and it just kept on reacting the same way. And I was just like, oh shit, people are super fickle, and he's seeing that. And I think if you're in a position of power like that and you see this shit, eventually it's going to either get to your head, make you jaded, and then question what the fuck is real anymore. You know what I mean? What do people really want? To wrap that up, I think that I felt it was very dangerous for him to say that. And I still do feel that way. That being said, it's not his responsibility to teach us what to believe, and we need to take accountability as ourselves to say, okay, Kanye has his opinions, or that person has their opinions. I may agree, I may disagree, but I don't need to get my information from him. If I agreed or if I didn't disagree with the topic, maybe I should research that topic a little bit more and find out what I believe in those topics and have dialogue, discussion. Yeah. But we're so quick to label somebody crazy, and they might have a moment of loss of what's going on, but as soon as you label them crazy, it's very hard to remove that label from that person.
100%. I think touch on a few things. I think in America we have this dangerous culture of like this dangerous celebrity culture of like propping up celebrities or anybody who has that spotlight as like this person to look up to and look to for information, when that shouldn't necessarily be the case. We should be propping up the minds that do have experience and have research topics as like the go-to people for this information. And that's not to say that like, celebrities can't have opinions or that basketball players should shut up and dribble. I'm not saying that at all. I think that that's the opposite of what people should do. But we should also allow space for humans to be humans and to like make mistakes or have their own issues, and not like demonize them for being a human at the end of the day and not being perfect, especially when it comes to regards to mental health. Like part of the thing that I have been like one of the things that I have been seeing regarding this topic that like I hate seeing is like, oh, he's a millionaire or multimillionaire or a billionaire, why should we care? But he has like the resources to take care of his problems. To me, okay, sure, like maybe he has the resources, right? But to me, like the problematic thing is not necessarily with Kanye himself. Of course, I do think there are problematic things, but I think it's more problematic of like the way that we portray and the way that we or that the media allows a black man or a brown man to be seen, right? And that this is a very visible figure within the black community that is going through these mental health issues, and this is the way you're going to portray him in mass media, and so that everybody sees it and they say, look at this crazy black man, right? Or look at him, he's just this wild black man, and then other people get to thinking this is how black people are. Like, that's dangerous. Like, yeah, sure, does Kanye have the resources to take care of himself? Yeah, but my biggest problem is like, yo, stop putting that shit out. Like, mass media, stop putting that, making that the image of like what Kanye is or who Kanye is, right? And then people like around him should also be stepping in and being like, nah, we're not going to do that. And so, yeah, like, should I care about Kanye's health? Like, I care about the way that it comes across to other people and the way it comes across to the media and how other people could look at it. Do I care about Kanye? Sure, Kanye's had an influence on my life. And also, one of the lines that I always come back to when thinking about this is like, damn, man, Kanye is probably a guy that isolates himself a lot. Because on College Dropout, one of my favorite albums of all time, he says, lock yourself in a room doing 5 beats a day for 3 summers. That's a different word, like 3 summers. And I'm like, damn, this fool probably was locking himself in a room, making 5 beats a day for like 3 summers. And that can drive a person wild when you're that deep into your art and that deep into like your creativity and that deep into your own world. And I'm sure that extends to different aspects of his life and not just his art. Just like, leave me alone. I'm going to be in this room.
I mean, look at the compound that he's at, right? Where is that, in Wyoming? Yeah. And he has like a bunker underneath it too. Yeah. Should I do the same thing though?
I mean, I would love to get away like that as well, but I think that just comes back to me like that line is always like, damn man, like it's a foreshadowing of like just isolation. Like you were okay with isolating yourself for creativity or creative purposes at that point in your life, but you know, it's not always healthy to isolate yourself and just to be in your own head. If you're not utilizing resources to, you know,
Center yourself.
yeah.
And at the same time, maybe his isolation is also as a way of protection from him knowing like, yo, these people around me don't really care about me, you know?
True.
So I need to isolate myself. What did he say? It was kind of like he felt like he was living in Get Out, you know, in that horror film. And I'm just like, I believe it. We all said it, you know?
Hey, man.
But, you know.
Kris Jenner, or no, I mean, Bruce Jenner, you know, now Caitlyn Jenner, Lamar Odom, that Scott guy, I forget his last name, Kanye. You know, there's a history of just, you know, some
turmoil
ugly things going
within the realm of that group.
when you live for like the attention of the mass media and like every like attention is like the ultimate goal, you know, and you do anything for that, it can drive you to a lot of crazy places.
And I think that's kind of where some people may have lost a little bit of empathy towards Kanye because of a lot of the paparazzi moments that he had in the past, where some people would say, oh, Kanye caused the paparazzi to come over and check out his outfit and cause the paparazzi for these things or those events to be seen, where he was probably doing that as a promotional shit because you need to look at these new line of fashion that I'm going for. But when you do that and then you have these episodes, people might think this is another stunt, you know? And so the empathy gets lost at that point where it's like, is this real? Is this not real? Is he just doing Kanye?
And I guess from now on, one thing we're going to use moving forward on this show is referring to weak men, referring to men who, you know, feel the need to put down others or to, you know, prey on others or to just be a weak motherfucker as yo-hos from
Straight
now
up.
on, I think is a rule we're putting into place. You know, yesterday, A.O.C. kind of, you know, I don't know if she broke the internet, but definitely the internet was speaking, and media was speaking as A.O.C. took Congress floor and really just kind of beautifully broke down how much of an asshole Ted Yoho is. Ted Yoho is a congressman, represents Florida, and a AOC, you know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, congresswoman from New York. I believe she is the youngest congresswoman, right?
I think so.
30 years old, a few months older than I am, and you know, laid out a story of an interaction with Ted Yoho on the front steps of Congress, in which Ted Yoho berated her, demeaned her, called her outside of her name, and AOC, you know, went on this powerful, spoke very powerfully on Congress floor, and I think it touched a lot of people in different ways. I know for you and I can't completely speak for you, but so I guess for me, it's the use of providing an example of her father, and you know, Ted Yoho's juxtaposing her father, you know, and their relationship versus Ted Yoho being a father and a husband, but still feeling like he is able to demean women in the way that he demeaned AOC, I think was something that really stuck with me. What are your feelings?
Yeah, a lot of things stuck with me in there, right? Specifically when I think we talked about this in the last episode when we were talking about Vanessa Guillen, about how men need to start taking accountability, man, for their shit, and that you can be a decent, or you can be a father to a daughter, you could be a husband to a wife, all that, and still disrespect women and still you know, do that foul shit. And I'm not gonna front like when I was younger, I didn't do some of those foul shits. You know, it's like definitely had my issues growing up with my relationship with the daughter of my mom and this and that. So I do want to say this to all the yo-hos out there. A yo-ho is not a permanent situation that you have to be in. You don't have to remain a yo-ho for the rest of your life. But I will put your ass as a yo-ho for the rest of your life if you don't change your ways. So I think, you know, as parents, we need to. I can't do shit about the old ass yo-hos, right? They are who they are. I could just clown them for the rest of their life. But for the new kids that are coming up, we have to as parents just kind of limit their exposure to the way that we treat other people. Like, you know, guide them to learn how to treat other people, how to show respect to one another, but most importantly, how to show self-respect to yourself and to know that you are going to mess up along the way. So as a parent, you can't control every single exposure that comes to them, but you can teach them how to handle those different situations that might arise. You can't teach them that there's going to be a point in your time where you are wrong, and you don't have to attack somebody else completely to defend yourself, to be like, no, I'm not wrong. It's okay to acknowledge that you've messed up. And if we instill this sense of self-security and acknowledgement of wrong, then we're able to teach them how to genuinely apologize, genuinely make up for the wrongdoing that they've done. Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how I feel, man. I just feel like it's not a permanent position to be a punk. It's actually great if you're able to acknowledge that that you've messed up in the past, and that you take the actions to make up for that and correct any kind of wrongdoing that you've done in the process.
I dig it, and I feel the same way. You know, it's you don't always have to be that way, and I can say the same for myself. You know, I think not always to use your environment as an excuse for, you know, your practices, because we all have to have personal accountability. But when you grow up and you only see a certain way of like referring to women or treating women, you know, it's hard to kind of see that as a negative. But growth happens over time, and you shouldn't always be that way. And everybody should grow. You should strive to be better than you were, you know, yesterday, and strive to be better than you were the week before. And anytime you learn anything new, you should take that, internalize it, and attempt to be better because of it. So I like what you said in terms of like, just because you're a yo-ho right now doesn't mean you're always going to be a yo-ho. And there's the ability to grow and change your views, and to be better and move forward. You know, I think A.O.C., you know, touching on like, just because you're a father, just because you're a husband, doesn't mean that like you are a person that is, you know, that values women, or that understands, you know, that these terrible things happen. And I think it's easy for us to lose sight as fathers, as husbands, because, you know, you can treat your daughters one way, or you can treat your wife one way, and then go out into the world and walk in the world and feel like, all right, fuck all these other women or whatever, right? And I think that we all have to take good hard looks at ourselves as men and just be like, you know, am I doing the best for myself? Am I the best version of myself when it comes to, you know, these situations, right? Because again, like I was saying, you know, I do have my own past, and not necessarily always, you know, being the most respectful of women. And I'm not going to sit here and act like, you know, I haven't said things or done things, you know, that can be seen, or that, you know, we're disrespectful just in conversation, right? Not necessarily, it doesn't always have to be like directly to a woman. Like, I don't know, that's not my style. You know, I was raised by a powerful mother. I have good relationships with women, and I have a lot of positive women in my life, you know. So it's not like I was just walking around calling B word this, B word that. But when you're around the homies and you're like, you know, get comfortable speaking about certain things, you know, that is also a way of just propping up this culture of like, superiority of the man, right? And I think we all have to challenge ourselves to be better when it comes to that, because those are the kinds of things that allow for situations like this to happen.
That's why that homeboy could have been right next to him and not say shit during the whole interaction between him and AOC. And I think that's what we touched on last time too, is just like, yo, when there's two people that allow that to happen, that's when yo, bro, we're failing out here, man. You know what I'm saying? There's two of us out there and we still couldn't check it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And referring to Roger Williams, another congressman that was present when, I'm just going to call it like it is, Ted Yoho called AOC a fucking bitch, according to AOC and the way that she quoted it. And again, man, like you said, like we gotta do better. We have to do better. In terms of like fatherhood, the things that like really touched me, AOC was talking about her father and the relationship that they had. And, the fact that her father isn't here now or wasn't here to like hear about the way that Ted Yoho disrespected her. But that AOC also has, other women at home, other young women at home, or that like are part of her family or part of her community. And her desire to speak up stems from like teaching them that you shouldn't let men disrespect you. You should step up for yourself. And the scary part, going back to last week and when we talked about Vanessa Guillen, right, is like, I know a lot of women have fear of doing that because, it could be a Vanessa Guillen situation, and hopefully not to that extent, but even the same as just being blackballed in a situation like AOC within politics or within any industry just for speaking up. Those things happen all the time. But I think it's incredibly strong for AOC to be like, nah, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do this and I'm going to say these things and I'm going to call them out. And, I'm going to speak my truth. And as a father, for me, it hurts me to think of a day when I'm not around to protect my daughters from that. Because I'll slap a Yoho up. I'm just playing. I don't want to condone violence, but sometimes. But it hurts me to think that, like, I can't protect my daughters from that all the time. I'm not going to be able to. And I'm sure because of the world, and I can knock on wood and hope that it doesn't happen. But the reality is, it's probably going to happen. It's probably going to happen where they get disrespected in that way. And, I can only hope to raise them to be powerful and strong and to be like, nah, it's not how it's going down. You're not going to speak to me that way. This is going to be different. And hope for the best for those situations.
That's a great point. I think that is another thing of what AOC, of how she affected me in that, is that, and I guess it kind of goes back to what my sister was saying when she was roasting me on the comment section, that it's not just the men's responsibility or the father's responsibility to protect. Women can protect themselves as well. And AOC clearly proved that during her speech and just how she handled the situation. Granted, she is a woman of power now, and she is very well known. So a woman, an ordinary person, an ordinary woman down the street probably doesn't have that same ability to just kind of walk past this cat as he's putting, his finger in her face. And the situation could have most definitely ended up differently than her just being able to go and cast her vote and handling it. And there's press there. That doesn't happen in every part of the world. So, but the good thing about it is that as a parent now, seeing that, and I've always aimed for that as when I'm, bringing my daughters up, but is to teach them how to be able to kind of stand up for themselves and how to feel great about looking at themselves in the mirror at the end of the day and say, I handle my shit, So kudos to AOC's father for creating such a, well, not creating, helping raise such a strong person.
100%. I think one of the most powerful parts is when AOC says, and I'm going to read it. She said, "And I do not need Representative Yoho to apologize to me. Clearly, he does not want to. Clearly, when given the opportunity, he will not." And I will not stay up late at night waiting for an apology from a man who has no remorse over calling women and using abusive language towards women. But what I do have issue with is using women, wives, and daughters as shields and excuses for poor behavior. And again, like we touched on that just a second ago, but I think just expressing like the strength and the ability to say, you know what, you don't have to apologize to me. Like, you have your beliefs, you have the way you operate. Go ahead and do that. I don't need your apology. It's not going to keep me up late at night, but I need to make an example, and I need the example to be clear to other men out there, but even to women. Like, you know, just because you have these relationships doesn't mean that it excuses you from like being a better person. But I think it's extremely powerful to be like, you know, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm not going to lose sleep over you being a dickhead. I'm not going to lose sleep over you being an asshole. But I want people to know. Because that's something that I struggle with even, is like, you know, man, like sometimes people do things. Sometimes people get to you and it's like, you know, I gotta let it go. I gotta let it go so that I can step into my own power and just, you know, not stress off of it and not allow it to take any of my energy away from being the powerful person that I need to be. And I think A.O.C provided a perfect example of that, of like, you know, I got business to take care of. I think you're a dick. People should know you're a dick. And just because you have a wife and daughters doesn't mean that you're not an asshole. But I ain't going to lose sleep over it. So fuck you, you're cool, fuck you, I'm out.
Bro, I wonder what that conversation was like at home with his family. You know what I'm saying? How his wife or his daughters looked at him like, you know, or, you know, maybe not. Maybe they buy into some of the shit too. Who knows?
Yeah. Maybe it was super awkward. Like, oh, so how was work today? But yeah, I don't know. Any final thoughts on that?
No, sir. But I'm pretty sure we'll have more discussions about this in the days to come.
I'm sure. Cool.
So with the topic of A.O.C and how strong the individual is, and you know her background from working as a server in the food and beverage industry, and then finally making her way up to, you know, the house. To me, it's an amazing journey, and it's something that I admire tremendously. And I've never really felt like, I've always wanted to go into politics or something like that, but I never really felt confident enough in myself to be like, well, I don't know all that information. I don't know what to do and how to get there. And obviously all that comes with who you surround yourself with and your education. So speaking about education right now, on what's happening with distance learning, how that affects, marginalized communities and the future of what's to come with that. So, you got any thoughts on that, Sam?
Yeah, I think, you know, as we start to near this next school year, and both of us having kids that are in school, you know, there's this transition that's happening, and there's still a lot of uncertainty surrounding like what's going to happen in this next school year. I know for, you know, my daughters being in elementary, there's a possibility that they don't go back in the first semester and it just continues to be distanced. You know, part of the fear in that, you know, I think there's multiple levels. My wife, fortunately, is able to work from home right now, but I know that's not the case for a lot of parents. And so when you talk about like continuing distance learning at this pace, you know, what does that do to childcare? That's one thought of mine, is like, you know, how do people who don't have access to childcare really deal with that? The second thing is like, how many kids do we leave behind that don't necessarily have access to the clear study space, or to the resources that they need, or to the positivity that a teacher may play on them, or a teacher may play in their life, or faculty may play in their life? Or to me, you know, having coached basketball for a good portion of time, I think about kids that I've coached, and I think about like, you know, the role that basketball played in their life, and like how extracurricular activities can play this role in kids' lives. That's like, you know, a release for them, and provides discipline or provides confidence. And, you know, my fear with, you know, distance learning in a lot of these things is like the kids that get left behind, the kids that fall through the cracks because they don't have the positivity in their life or the positive releases or the things that help them build confidence and build belief in themselves, or even just, like build a solid foundation of education because they don't have the resources or people around them to help them figure all of it out. I know I'm very fortunate. My daughters are very fortunate. My wife and I are very fortunate to be in a situation where we can balance it. But I don't know if I know not everybody is. So how are you feeling about your daughter's potential return to school, or not potential return to school, but potential return to laptop learning?
Yeah, it's I'm very lucky that the age gap between my daughters is so big, right? They're 15 years apart. So I'm dealing with a newborn and I'm dealing with a teenager, and it's really not dealing. I get a chance to observe both, and they're both super cool kids. So it's not too much labor going on in that. But what I do notice is, my daughter starts feeling a little bit like, I guess, cabin fever, even though we're both pretty much homebodies anyway. But I know that this was her years to start really trying to develop those relationships with friends and having a pretty solidified bond. So in a way, I feel like this is kind of hurting her somewhat, but it's also strengthening. I don't know. I think it's all about perspective, right? It's just how you want to look at it. I feel like because of this time apart, she's able to hone in on those people that actually reach out to her and all that other stuff, and to really kind of solidify those friendships. But as for going back to school, she is very fortunate, and so am I, but my daughter's very fortunate because my wife is a math teacher at the school that she goes to. So we get information, about what's going to happen. Not really beforehand, because literally right now teachers and school districts are just kind of figuring this thing out on the fly. But at least I have that resource right there of my wife to be like, okay, here's how you stay strict on these things. Here's how much time you should allocate for this study or that study. So it's very helpful for me and for Athena. But I can't imagine how that is for other kids. And my wife and I talked about that, about how the gap is getting bigger for kids who don't have all those resources, right? What if you have multiple kids and you only have one Chromebook at home or one computer at home to access the internet, and their study times are at the same time? How do you do that? Just peace and quiet, like you're saying, at home. So everything is up in the air. And I'm grateful that I don't have kids that are in the same age range, because I wouldn't know how to handle that. That would be pretty insane.
It's madness, I tell you. It's madness. I don't know. I guess, the biggest thing for me is the kids that lose access. Not having access to a lot of these things. I have basically the first group of boys that I ended up coaching I started with them when they were in 6th grade, coached them through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And they're seniors now. This is gonna be their senior year, and there's a few of them. There's a couple of them that I think have the potential to play college basketball at the next level. And my heart hurts for them, because it's like, their AAU season was canceled, and what the future holds for their senior basketball year, it's hard to say. And is there a potential loss of opportunity for education? That I'm not saying for these two. These two are good, like the two that I'm speaking about are really good kids. They have good heads on their shoulders. But I think about it for other kids who are like, maybe athletics, and maybe not even just athletics, but art or music. Maybe those are avenues that would have given you access to higher education that you don't have access to without it, right? Whether it's because of home situation or money, financial situations, whatever it is, right? you know, like you said, the gap is widening. And a lot of my mind has just been on like, how do we, you know, help that out? How do we figure out ways to bridge that gap, you know, as just a community? I think one of the things, you know, as we talked about A.O.C. and her parents and her father, she talks a lot about her other family members, you know, and I think the important part of like recognizing that A.O.C., I believe, is from the Bronx, and I'm not 100% sure about her like background, her upbringing, but like in situations, you know, with marginalized people, a lot of times it takes a village to raise a child, to keep a child away from like negative things. And right now, because of like, you know, sheltering in place or whatnot, you know, the village right now isn't as strong as it has been, or these villages maybe are suffering in different ways. And so these kids don't have access to that same village that would have been keeping them on the straight and narrow, or allowing them to, you know, focus on the things that they needed to focus on. So how do we bridge that gap of like, how do we continue to provide the village for some of these children that don't have access to it because of not being able to get to school or be out? My mind has been on that a lot lately.
That's where we come in, Sam. That is where we come in. You know, it's funny because, I want to say back in 2017 officially, but I think it was a little bit sooner than that, 2014, I started this nonprofit called My Block. And My Block stands for Mentor Youth, Building Love, Ownership, Community, and Knowledge. And I did that when I was doing the Fire Academy, just because, well, one, we needed to volunteer for things. And there was a lot of things that I could have volunteered for. And I did to, you know, get kids to enroll into after school programs, or mostly like continuation school and stuff. And so we did that. But I felt like it wasn't enough. I wanted to do more. So then I was like, well, why don't I just create something, and then anything that I want to do, I can volunteer for it and have other people from the neighborhoods volunteer for it. So when we did that, it started off really well. And then I adopted the 5 neighborhoods that I grew around over in Hayward. So that was Scripps, the street that I grew up in, Cathy Way, what else? Peterman. No, not Peterman. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was Peterman. Peterman and a couple other ones, right? Fry. Just my surrounding neighborhood in West Hayward. And we cleaned that up. And then we kind of started slowing down because of all the fires that were happening. Because you couldn't really be outside with the smoke. And our intention was to, one, get kids to know their neighbors, get the neighbors to know their kids, so there isn't like cops being called all the time, so that you can protect your community a lot more. That was part of the community aspect of it. We did a softball team. And then we also did a cookout with Texas Roadhouse in Union City. They came over to Southgate, and I invited everybody from the community. We had free food, we had games, and it was just kind of a way to start, you know, uniting people in there. I invited the police department. I invited the fire department. They didn't really want to be a part of it. Whatevs. But
Busters.
Yeah. And I was like, I was a little upset because I was like, man, you know. Anyway.
Here's what it is.
So we had to kind of slow down, and then the restaurant that I worked at, Texas Roadhouse, caught on fire. So a lot of people's money kind of started depreciating, or not depreciating. They started losing money, and it got a little bit tough. And then I started working at the barbershop. I started diving into that a lot more. So my time was limited, but I feel like now is the time to get back into it. I have a little bit more time. And the biggest thing that I was pushing during the whole My Block thing, we did election discussions. So we would try to inform people about who the candidates are, what they stand for. Everybody dove into one candidate, and they dove into, you know, what kind of legislation was getting put in there, what kind of policies were getting put in there. And then we would each dive in and take a real good look at that. And we were able to host it at different places. Sometimes it was hosted at my house. Sometimes it was hosted, I can't remember the other location. And then the last location we did it at was at the old barbershop that I used to work at in San Leandro called Goodfellas. That's a great barbershop. Once we're open, check that out. Once it's legal and safe. So I think it's a great time to start again. And I want, if there are members out there of the community that have some sort of either expertise or some sort of knowledge, you don't have to be an expert, because we don't need experts, but we do need people with really good knowledge or resources on how to get people informed. And my goal is to get, it's kind of like that imposter syndrome, right? Where you stop feeling like, oh, I can't do this and I don't know enough and this and that, man. The little bit of information that you do have, as long as it's accurate information, can help somebody else out. And if we join to get people back out there into those communities and becoming that village for the kids that might need it right now, I mean, we can, I think, do a lot of good, you know, just kind of either help out with fundraising, get some Chromebooks out there, whatever it might be.
Yo, I love it. I love it, my guy. Yeah, I think, you know, the need to continue to build community throughout this. Obviously, like, you know, events are going to be hard in any form at this point in time. But, you know, a lot of things that you touch on are the things that I think we have to prevent in order to build the strongest community and in order to build the strongest young folks. And those things are like preventing imposter syndrome and preventing the self-doubt that can easily take over. You know, I think it's something that you and I have talked about before, and both like having to get through. You know, what you talk about a lot of times, or what you're just talking about right now, is, you know, an aspect of entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship doesn't always have to be like self-serving and like, you know, I need this business to get the bag and to make the money. But like community work is entrepreneurship in a lot of ways too. And just being self-sustainable and, you know, a community that surrounds each other with resources and love and fulfills needs. And, you know, as you were talking, and it's kind of the premise of this whole like podcast for you and I in a lot of ways, like just effing go, is like, stop doubting yourself, you know, stop thinking too hard about like the things that may potentially go wrong, and just get out there and go. But the reality is not everybody thinks that way. And you constantly have blocks. And, you know, in situations, again, like coming back to education, where like this gap is widening, it's easier for you to be like, for kids that don't have access to it, to be like, how am I ever going to do anything? How am I ever going to get anywhere when it just feels like this world is against me? When it feels like all of these things are happening, coronavirus, police brutality, these things that are in the news major right now. And it's like, am I ever going to accomplish anything in my life? Am I ever going to be more than, am I ever going to see more than just this block, right? And I think that's powerful to be able to say, you know what, let's get out there and let's start showing a lot of these kids that like whatever you want is a possibility, with just believing in yourself, and moving, manifest, move, motivate, just get out there and go. Yeah, it's beautiful. We can definitely get to work over the next few weeks and few months of like figuring out ways to kind of bring those things back together. And I'm all behind you, brother. Whatever you need from me, you know what time it is. You know what time I'm on. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, because I think it's extremely important, like you said, and it's something that's just been constantly on my mind.
For sure, man. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the support. Yeah. You know, for those people that do feel like the world is against you, I mean, shit, it is, you know, but it doesn't have to be. You know, I really do believe. Wow, Charlie can't English today. I really do feel and believe that we can kind of maneuver how we want our life to be, right? I think Will Smith was talking about like the universe is like water, similar to Bruce Lee. And how you kind of just direct the current of how you want it to go, but you do have to put effort into it. And I think when you have the resistance, actually Immortal Technique quoted something today from the Palestinian people, where it's your existence is your resistance. And to me, it resonated in a cool way, where it's like, in order to exist, you kind of have to resist those pressures of life that are trying to weigh you down. And the more that you exist, the more that you resist, and the more that you resist, the more that you exist, in my opinion. So I feel like if you're feeling that way, keep going, keep pushing, and you're gonna change the momentum on that toward you, for the benefit of your future. So, yeah,
100%. I think when you said like the world is against you, and it kind of is, right? The one thing I thought to myself is like, the world is against you, but the world can also be for you, and it's your choice as to what perspective you choose to have. You know, you can
and airplanes fly off the resistance of the wind. So start flying. Sorry.
Start flying. No, to me, that's like the biggest thing is getting past that mental block of like, you know, I feel like the world is against me, and it might just be, but you just got to look for, all right, this one thing is going to go my way. And maybe it does. Boom. Just like we were talking about earlier in the episode, find the small victories. Every day, I tell my daughters, every day you wake up is a small victory, is a victory. You know, every day you wake up, that's a blessing. And I truly believe that. And a conversation I had with my daughters earlier this week is like, happiness is a choice. You know, you can choose to be happy. You know, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of mental and emotional and spiritual work to get to that point, but you can choose happiness. You know, despite all of the shit, you can figure out a way to be joyful about something, because there's always something in your world that that you're blessed to have, or that you should be grateful for. You know, especially, you know, as evil and as fucked up as we may paint our situation to be in America, we're blessed in a lot of ways to be here. You know, we could have been born into different situations. It could have been born into different environments that are a lot more harsh and that have a lot less resources. But we weren't. And so I try to teach my daughters, be grateful for a lot of things, and, you know, choose to be happy. And, you know, they're still young. And so there's emotions that are constantly flowing, and you don't always understand how to grasp it and how to control it. But as they get older, I hope they understand, like, you know, it's all about perspective, and you can have control over your perspective. And you can choose to be happy in almost any situation. Yeah.
See? Yeah, man. I think on the next episode, we should probably talk more about the entrepreneurial side of us. I'm excited to dive into that. So I think that kind of wraps it up for today. What you thinking?
I think I feel the same way. You know, it's a lot of, I mean, you know, just conversation in general with us tends to be like as lighthearted as I think we may come off sometimes. I think we're both also very introspective and can be serious about a lot of topics. And a lot of topics that we talk about tend to be hard, tend to take a lot of thought. And I think at the core of it, it's like, you know, just having the space to bounce perspective and ideas off of each other is a beautiful place to be at. And yeah, I think, you know, the further and further we continue to go, we can continue to touch on all of these dope things that you and I do in our own lives, and like the things that we care to do in the journey that we're both on, because at the end of the day, this is all for the love of the journey. Thank you all for tuning in with us today, man. We definitely, like I was covered a lot of heavy stuff, but also a lot of stuff that we need to talk about as fathers, as men in this society, and what we need to do to hold each other accountable, the different ways, you know, we need to walk throughout life to make sure that we're being the best versions of ourselves, but also trying to figure out ways to not just hold other men accountable, but to help build other people up in this community. And I think they're all important aspects of our life and all important things to both of us. But again, man, just want to thank you all for tuning in. It's kind of a wrap for this week. Again, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Click subscribe, like it, share it, leave a review. And we will see you guys again next week, y'all.